Welcome back, everybody, to our final teaching video for the quarter. My dog was barking at me, so he's going to be in the video. Anyway, this week we're talking about evidence, so let's get to it. Last time we discussed introductions, but we also talked a bit about main claims. So just to recap, the main claim is the central idea for which you are arguing in your paper, and each body paragraph should support one subclaim or aspect of that larger argument, but the whole paper should be organized around that central idea. And that central claim should be debatable. It's windy here. If you just say what's already in the prompt, you're not wrong, but you're also not making a debatable claim. You're not really arguing for something specific that you can convince the reader of. So we want a specific debatable claim. But if my claim is debatable, then how can I convince my audience that I'm right? Grounds provide the support for your claim. Okay, well, what are grounds? Grounds come in two flavors, reasons and evidence. Reasons are the analytical beliefs that you hold about why your claim is true. And evidence comes directly from the object that you're analyzing, and it supports those analytical beliefs that you have. So evidence backs up reasons, proving those reasons, and then those reasons support the main claim. So evidence and reasons work together to support your larger argument. Now, when you're writing from a text or something that you're drawing direct evidence from, that evidence should shape your beliefs and help you come up with the reasons and the main claim rather than the other way around. If you start with the main claim and your reasons for that claim and then try to find evidence to support those reasons, then you run the risk of missing significant textual evidence that would be a better example of what you're arguing for, but also counterexamples. And so you could come up with an argument that sort of feels ill-fitted to the text at hand because you're missing some of that argumentative support, and you're also missing some of the real meat of the text that runs against your argument. So your evidence can feel cherry-picked if you start with your claim and work backwards to get your evidence. So that's just something to keep in mind. Well, how do reasons and evidence actually connect? There's an unspoken logical step happening between reasons and evidence. When we interpret a piece of evidence as proof of a belief, we're making a logical move that if evidence, then reason. That is called the warrant. Warrants are very important because if they're not believable, then your evidence and reasons don't really feel like they match up to the reader. So if your grounds aren't convincing the reader, the problem might be with the warrant. There are a couple of problems that you could have with a warrant. Warrants are often implied rather than explicitly stated, so they might just be a little unclear. If that's the case, you can explicitly state your warrant to make it a little clearer so the reader can follow the jumps in logic that you're making. But there's another potential problem that you could have, which is your reader might understand your warrant and disagree with it. There are several ways to approach this, including explicitly stating your warrant and arguing for it. You could provide additional evidence for that warrant, suggesting here's why this is a valid warrant, in the hopes of convincing your reader to accept your warrant and therefore believe that your evidence supports your grounds, your reasons, and your reasons support your claim. Another thing you can do is you can change your warrant. You can provide and perhaps clearly state an alternative reason that the evidence supports the claim, or an alternative analysis. You can change the way you're using that evidence, change the warrant, change the reason. You can, instead of interpreting a piece of evidence like, my dog is white, therefore he is a Great Pyrenees. Well, that's not a believable warrant, because there are all kinds of other white dogs. But you could say, my dog is white, therefore he blends into snow. That's a believable warrant because snow is the same color as my dog here. Now, obviously, that's not the kind of warrant you'd be making for any sort of claim based on textual evidence and reasons that come from that textual evidence. But that's just an example of the kind of thinking that we're doing here. Let's look at a real example of what we're actually doing. Here's a brief excerpt from Sarah Ahmed's Feminist Snap. I'd like you to pause the video on the next slide and take a few minutes to look at it and think about what you think is operating as evidence, what is operating as reason, and what you think the warrant is, and whether it's explicit or implicit. So give the video a pause here. All right, welcome back. So I will now show you what I think is going on in this paragraph. I believe that Ahmed is using this first sentence as a sort of example of a thought experiment, so it operates like evidence. And then the rest of this excerpt is reasons that you can interpret this evidence in a certain way, and the way that she is interpreting. It's the analytical meat of the paragraph, or the reasons. And those reasons have to do with this idea that resilience is a technology of will. And I think that that is the most explicit statement she has that is connected to the warrant. I think it's pretty explicit, even though it's not formatted in this if-then style that we are using. That's just a style that makes the logical leap of a warrant a little bit clearer. But the warrant of this paragraph is, if one has greater will, one can be more resilient, because the evidence is about this idea of resilience being linked to how much pressure a twig can take before it snaps. So since her whole analysis here is about resilience being related to will and resilience being this locus of control, the whole thing falls apart if you don't accept this assumption that resilience is linked to will, or that if one has greater will, one can be more resilient. So that's the thing about a warrant. It's sort of the unspoken framework by which the whole analysis of the paragraph linking the reasons to the evidence operates. So if you don't accept it, then the reader's not going to be convinced. So let's look at another example. Once again, I'm going to ask you to pause on the next slide. Just take a couple minutes and think about reasons, think about evidence, and think about warrants. Welcome back, everybody. So this paragraph, I believe, is a little bit more fragmented in that the evidence is more split up, and the reasons are interwoven throughout. I didn't highlight the first sentence or the first clause, because I think it's the point of the paragraph. But then we get into a really nice reason-heavy analysis that's also a summary of what's happening. So the author is providing context and summary, but also analytical moves, because in this first section, this first purple section, she says, this gated community seemed to offer the promise of a new life. So that's an that's an argument, that's a claim, that's a reason to back up a larger claim, but it's also a small claim in itself. It's making a statement of something that the author believes rather than an actual evidence, especially when she links it to the promise of the shopping mall in Dawn of the Dead. That's, once again, that's something the author believes. And then that interpretive move, that reason, is backed up by this evidence that she describes, these quotes about how nice these houses are and how this place is perfect. So that's why I think the evidence is in yellow, the reasons are in purple. The evidence is mostly around these quotes. Quotes are a great example of evidence, because how do you get something directly from a text? Well, you quote it. And then she does this sort of analytical work here in these reasons. And I think the warrant is not explicitly stated, but I believe the warrant is pretty clear here. There are a couple of ways you could say it, but the gist of it is, if something kills a character, then it is bad. And I don't think the author would need to state that explicitly to convince a reader of it, because that's a pretty straightforward, believable warrant. I mean, if something kills you, it is bad. If there is danger, that is a bad thing. That's pretty clear. And so the links between this evidence and these reasons they feel solid. We can understand why the reader chose these pieces of evidence to back up these reasons. This week, our writing seminars will be pretty chill. Your full first draft of your final paper is not due until Wednesday, so I'm not going to ask you to show up with anything close to a full draft. I just want you to show up to seminar with what you have so far. Because we are on vacation right now, I'm not going to ask you to send anything in early for me to send around and have people fill out worksheets on. Instead, I'm just going to ask you to bring what you have to workshop, and then I'll have you email it to the group on the spot, and we'll talk about it as a group. I'll come up with a worksheet with some questions that we'll use to guide our class discussion, but I'm not going to ask you to look at anything in advance, because I don't want to interrupt your vacation. You deserve a break. Because of rising COVID caseloads, I'd like to reiterate that if you aren't feeling well, please stay home, especially if you've been traveling. I've been traveling, I've been wearing my mask, but if I feel sick, I will change it to Zoom. If you guys feel sick, let me know. I will send a Zoom link. You can Zoom into our scheduled seminars. We can do makeup sessions as needed. I take COVID very seriously, so if you're not feeling well, please let me know, and don't worry, I've got your back. We can do whatever you need. Just take care of yourselves, and if you are feeling well, I look forward to seeing you. I hope you had a lovely break and got some well-deserved rest. Bye, everyone.